Okay, great. So we are talking about parallel timelines revealed. And what I wanted to do with this theme, and you guys got to choose the theme, which is so fun. I love doing those polls inside of the membership now. I was a little surprised this is the one that got chosen. Um, I don't know why. I kind of thought everybody was going to jump on the Pleiadian vibe, but I'm happy that you did because I had so many people messaging me after the last timeline event. I did like an IG live. This was back on the eclipse day, like the day of the eclipse, which was April 8th. So it's been a while.
Yep.
And I did this timeline event, claim your timeline. And it was all about like what timelines are potentially open to you, what do they feel like, how many are available, and then you being able to choose what you wanted and fully claim that. And then, like I said, I got all of these messages from people saying like, oh my God, stuff is shifting, stuff is happening. So like my personal mentor that I was working with was experiencing a bunch of shifts. I experienced a bunch of shifts, but I noticed that they didn't happen until like a few weeks after. So I think that there was like integration time needed, and then that shift happened. So we are going to do another, because it was so powerful, we're going to do another Claim Your Timeline event, but we're going to do that as our second event. First, let's understand timelines a little bit. So what I wanted to do today was talk about timelines. I have kind of like a little mini lesson for you here, all about parallel timelines and how they work and all the questions that I could think to ask. And then I want to open up the chat to you to feel free to ask any questions that pop up for you. Maybe wait closer to the end because they might already be answered, right? But if questions pop up, then I will definitely take some time to do a Q&A at the end. And Keegan's just saying he's really been affected by the solar flares. Yes, of course. Everybody has. I felt like there was some real major integration happening between that and the timeline stuff. And I was feeling, I think I put it in the chat, I was feeling like really last weekend just fully overwhelmed and exhausted. But then I started feeling better this week. So I'm hoping that it's just going to get like better and better. Okay. So let's talk about hello, cutie. Orion came over to visit. Okay, so let's talk about parallel timelines revealed. So the things that I want to cover today with you, and I just want to say that I, of course, set up a sacred space and I channeled this through from Metatron. That's somebody that I've been using a lot lately to get my information from. Like my oversoul is what I've understand that he is for me. Everyone has a different oversoul. One of my oversouls, I know we have like different sized ones, but something that feels pretty close to me enough that I can get like a lot of detailed information from. And so I was asking Metatron things like, how are parallel timelines created? Can we visit our parallel selves? Can we borrow energy from the timelines? Can we swap places? Are highest timelines real? And then what else? Sorry, let me just change the page here. And then does Earth have parallel timelines? And do parallel versions of ourselves die at different times? So those are the questions that I asked that we're going to answer right now. And I really, again, welcome your questions as in the chat as we go through. Okay, so the first thing was, how are timelines created? So the interesting thing is that when you create your soul contracts before you come to Earth, you come in with one timeline. It's just clean, it's just pure, right? It's like you're born in, and we know we choose our parents, we choose our culture, we choose the country that we're going to be born. We choose all of this stuff in our parallel timeline. Or sorry, we choose all of this stuff in our soul contracts. And then we come in and it's one timeline. It's not all split off yet, right? Because there hasn't been any big choices that have happened. So we start out as this singular timeline when we are born, and that is the timeline that reflects most purely your soul contracts. Okay. So then the second thing that happens is now as you get older and you're growing up and everything, the choices that you make in your life that so it has to be choices that directly affect another person, right? Not just any choice. So like not, okay, am I going to have green tea Or am I going to have a coffee? Like some people think little tiny choices will make these separate timelines, but that's not the information that I got at all. In order to create a fully parallel timeline, your choice has to be big enough that it directly affects someone else. Here's some examples. You break up with someone, right? We've all broken up with someone, I'm sure. So you have a breakup. Well, there's a version of you that didn't do that. That's a big timeline choice, right? I'm going to break up and then one doesn't. Another timeline choice would be to move or leave your job, something where you're affecting other people's reality, right? It affects their reality because you're either leaving or coming in or interacting with them in some way. Okay, so choices that directly affect other people's reality, like those examples, will create extra timelines to hold the new possibilities. So there's all these new possibilities now, and so there has to be extra timelines to hold the different possibilities. These choices, you can think about them like a choose your own adventure. Have you ever read one of those books when you were a kid? You get to, as you get partway into the book, it says, if you want Sally to go down the scary dark path, flip to chapter 19. And if you want her to stay on this path that's light, go to chapter 7. Okay, so they're different chapters, but they're in the same book. So I know that that's a little convoluted, but try to think about it like you're still in one book, but your timelines are just different chapters of that book, where you're still Jenny, or you're still Veronica, or you're still Sharita. You're still that person in that one book with that one soul contract, one book. But the different timelines are, ooh, choose your own adventure. I want to experience this where I do break up and I don't break up, or I do move and I don't move. So extra chapters in the book gets thicker, but it's all holding the story of you still. If you need clarity on that, pop it in the chat, but hopefully that made sense for you. Okay, so that was all about how timelines are created, when they are created, but at the beginning it's just a pure one timeline, singular, when you're a baby, and then it has to change if the choices that you're making are affecting other people's reality. It has to create a timeline to hold those new possibilities. So let's see what question we have here. Since I'm obsessed with alternative history, I assume there are some timelines where history went in a different direction, like the Germans winning World War II, just as a historical example. That is such a great question. So I'd love to hear about those timelines, and if so, how they are created. Okay, so there are Earth, so personal timelines can have parallel timelines, but then there are also parallel timelines for Earth. And I'm going to get to that. I'm going to remember this question, but let me just do a little bit more about the personal stuff first. Okay, so let's continue on with personal parallel timelines. So, do we ever visit our parallel selves? The answer is definitely yes, and you probably already knew that because you probably have already experienced that. You've done it intentionally in a meditation or in a healing, or it's happened during like a dream. This happened to me during a dream. So a lot of this happens at night when you're dreaming, and it's very like automatic. You're not trying to, it just is happening. But you can intentionally visit parallel timelines through meditations, guided meditations, and astral travel. There's lots of reasons. You want to go and see what your lifetime looks like if you didn't make that choice. You want to go there for healing, you want to learn, you want to activations, all those kinds of things. You can go and do it intentionally, but most of the time we are visiting our parallel selves at night when we're sleeping. Now, that the body doesn't, it needs sleep, but the soul doesn't need sleep. So as the body goes to sleep, the soul travels on astral travels, right? So some of those astral travels will definitely be to these parallel timelines. I've shared in here before, maybe some of you have heard this, where I went to sleep and I woke up as another version of myself working at a restaurant. It was so real. I woke up and it was like waking up, and I was wearing like a black shirt and pants and apron kind of thing, and I was behind like a little cafe bar. And I remember thinking in my head, how do I know where the cups are? How did I know where that was? How am I doing this? Like there was a part of me in the back that was like, how do I know where to get things? But I just went with it because I just seemed, my body was just doing the motions, and I just knew where everything was. I could like fulfill the orders that people were putting in for their food and drinks and stuff. And I worked an entire shift in that weird state. And when I went to leave the little cafe that I was working at, I remember hearing the door ding on the way out. You know, there's like a little bell above. I open the door and the bell dings. And as that bell dings, I wake up as Jenny in my bed. And I was like, whoa, like what just happened? Because I went to sleep and I woke up and I'm working a shift. I worked the whole shift. I leave my shift for the day and I wake up as Jenny again. It's like, why? Why did that need to happen? So what was I gaining from that? Or what was I helping maybe a parallel self with from that? Because it goes both ways. We can borrow energy, but we can also send energy. And it can be for health reasons. You can send health, you can receive health, you can, you know, for perspective, you can gain new perspectives or give them if somebody visits you. It's just very like automatic, and it actually is happening from the oversoul's control. So let me just see if I can show you this diagram. I'm me in the diagrams, right? But if the oversoul is in control of keeping balance and harmony between all of the timelines, then they're automatically like chess pieces moving things around, right? So it's like, okay, Jenny in her current timeline is getting really ungrateful. She's like really missing the big picture here. And she's just like she's only focusing on what's not going right instead of all the amazing work that she's done or whatever. If you get into one of those headspaces where you can't see the forest for the trees and you're just like not present and not grateful and you're just seeing everything that's stressful. Well, you could be plucked out of that at night usually and put into a timeline where maybe it's a little more humble, like maybe the waitress thing or whatever. And you're experiencing a lifetime what kind of like brings you back into that grounded perspective. And then going forward, that could shift you in some way. And it doesn't have to be a pure conscious. You don't have to understand it. It's all just happening energetically, subconsciously, automatically, and spontaneously through the balancing act of the oversoul, which gives me this like really interesting new perspective of an oversoul, not just being an observer, but like helping along the way. So this is a bit of a diagram that I want to share. So we've got source, of course, here, and then we've got all these oversouls, and then the oversoul. So if source was having parallel experiences or parallel timelines, it would look like oversouls having lives. If oversouls were having these timelines, it would look like these, what did I call them? Soul tribe, right? This is an oversoul, soul tribe. So this is it having, these are timelines, right? Okay, let me experience myself here and here and here and here. Parallel timelines for this oversoul experience. And then if this soul tribe was having experiences like that, that's you right there. And all of your parallel selves, so your little mini oversoul, which is your soul tribe, is having all of that. And then it just keeps going and going. It never ends because the universe never ends. If this is you and you're having all of these parallel experiences every time you make a choose your own adventure choice, and then that one has all of them, like, do you see how it never ends? Every level of ourselves fans off into more and more and more and more. And so it's like, okay, God source is experiencing itself in all these ways as the oversoul, which is experiencing itself in all these ways as a mini oversoul, which is experiencing itself as all these versions of like individuals, your soul tribe, which is now you experiencing yourself as all these parallel versions of just Jenny. And then in that parallel version, I might also be like the choose your own adventure just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's like, does it ever end? Like, it's like one of those when you're looking in a mirror at a mirror at a mirror at a, like, it just keeps going and going and going. And I'm just like, okay, when I saw that vision, I was like, so it's just like, it's just forever. It's just like this ever expanding, like the universe is forever. It just keeps going and going and going. And it kind of feels like that's this kind of an experience where our human minds like to think linearly. So we really can't wrap our heads around the fact that every choice that is a bigger choice that involves someone creates a split of timelines. But think about if that parallel timeline is also making choices, and then they split into more, and it just keeps fracturing down and down. It just never ends. And so it's just like, we can try to understand this, but we also have to understand the scope of how big it is at the same time, right? Let me see this next question here from Keegan. Let me just have a sip. All right, so Keegan is asking, I typically visit my parallel self in dreams. For example, I almost died in this timeline when I was first born. Wow. And I assume there are many timelines where I did die when I was born, or I was killed when I was younger. I would love to know how soul contracts work in parallel timelines, if they're planned, if other timelines before we incarnate. Yeah. No, don't be sorry for long questions. These are great. And I have that answer to that when I asked the question of Metatron. You're just already in my head ahead of the answers, but they're coming, because I asked about what do we do if parallel versions of ourselves die at different times, which is what you're saying, right? About like the dying young or not dying. We will definitely get to that one as well. Okay, so we were talking about, can I borrow energy? And can I visit my parallel self? Absolutely. So yes, you can visit your parallel self. It would mostly happen if it's just like automatic. It happens at night. And you would do so to receive information, lessons, learning, healing, or to support them maybe in some way. Can we borrow energy from each other? Absolutely, because sometimes you need a perspective shift. Sometimes you need a little extra health. Sometimes you need this. Sometimes they need it. And your parallel selves are just as important as you. And so we have to make sure that we can keep as much harmony going as possible. And that's where I was shown that the oversoul kind of comes in and balances things out by like sending energy from one timeline to the next, like this great chess master who's looking at all these pieces and really doing all the ones in the book of Jenny, not all the timelines that an oversoul is, but all the ones inside of that Choose Your Own Adventure book of Jenny would have their own harmony, right? So if one is really not doing well and one is doing amazing, well, we can help balance each other out, not taking away from one. It's never about that. It's about empowering the other ones. So just seeing the oversoul as being a little bit more actively involved in moving energy around and taking your consciousness and putting you over here for a bit, like I visited that restaurant, or over here or over there, and staying for however long it takes for you to receive what you need, right? So that means that you could have a visitation of a parallel version of you coming into your life. And I don't know what that would feel like. Maybe that's that deja vu feeling. Maybe there's a feeling to it. And they would stay as long as they needed to get what they needed from you. Maybe you're amazing at compassion and they're a little more like jaded. And so they come to you for a bit, and it's all just helping, right? Because that one book of Jenny, that one story of me, is about that soul learning lessons. Even if it looks like it's split into many, many timelines, it's still the one soul of Jenny, right? Okay, so can we swap places? Yes, but not permanently. You can't swap places permanently with a parallel timeline because it would disrupt the reality. You would struggle to believe it was real. Like it would just always feel off. I've been dropped off. If you watch my YouTube channel, you probably have already seen this video where I had an abduction and I was dropped off in the wrong timeline. It was still Jenny, but I was dropped off and everything looked a little off. Like it was my home, the same home in the same bedroom, but the bed was against a different wall. The curtains were a different color. Everything just felt a little off. And I was very sus about it all. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, this isn't it. Right away, you know, it's not it. This isn't my life. This isn't reality. This feels wrong. You wouldn't be able to really integrate into that because you would feel like too much of like playing a character, when it's really important as the human that we kind of be very in the experience and kind of believe it. Even though we're all playing characters, we need to really believe it to get the lessons, to really believe I'm Jenny to get the lessons. And if you put me in the wrong timeline, I'm going to just always be looking at what it doesn't fit, and I can't get past that to get into the experience enough. So yes, you can swap places, but not permanently. You'll always be brought back to and converge and come back together and merge back together. It's rare, but it can happen. Uh-oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear me? Let me know in the chat. Did you miss anything? Are we good? It went out for a sec, but it's back. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so hopefully you heard what I was saying. I was saying that you would struggle to believe that it was a real. You would question reality too much if you swap places permanently with a different parallel timeline. So you can go for a time, but then you'll be called back to your original timeline. Okay. Now timelines can converge. They can merge back together, but it's rare. And the reason why it's rare is because the percentage of chances of you coming back to the same spot are so rare. Once you go off on your own adventure, you're probably going to go further away from each other. But if you don't, what it would look like is timelines converging when the frequencies realign again. So if a parallel version of yourself that was with you on this timeline went off on their own adventure and then somehow looped right back to where you are again, found you, like all of a sudden they're living in the same house, the same area, the same partner, and everything like matches right back up again, then there's a potential that it could merge back together again. If they find your way back to you, back to that present moment, like they took that detour, but now the lives match up perfectly again. Well, then it might merge back together into one experience again. And it would just like the lives would just naturally like two roads coming together and merging, right? That's very rare because what are the chances? I mean, I'm sure it happens, but what are the chances that if you go off and do something else, that you'd find your way back to the exact same moment? You might, but it sounds kind of rare. Okay. So most likely, once you kind of merge off from each other in that choose your own adventure, it's going to be a parallel timeline. Now it's not going to come back, but it can on the rare occasion do so. Okay, so then I asked about highest timelines because we talk a lot here about like highest self and highest timelines. Like if this is all the truth, then how does that fit in? So are highest timelines real? And the answer that I got was they exist as a potential for each parallel you, right? So if I have a potential highest timeline and then a different version of me, a parallel version of me is living in British Columbia, her highest timeline is going to look different than mine because we live in different places. And ultimately, the energies might be the same, you know, all the love and all the joy and all the freedom and all the things that you want, like health and everything. But the details of the situation will be different. Energies will be the same, but the details of the situation would be different. So these highest timelines exist as potentials. Thank you. Thank you. For each parallel version of you, they would all look different situationally, but they would include the same desired frequency outcome, right? So happy parallel timelines can act like a highest timeline, but your real highest potential is kind of like in a void where you manifest from. Like it's a potential, it's not a physical reality yet, but it's there and you can bring it into being through still frequency matching and aligning to the reality of it. Okay, so when we align to our highest timeline, we're frequency matching to our highest potential, even if that timeline is not in physical existence yet, even if it's still in the void of that black womb of potential that everything comes out of, we can still align to it. So again, just to confirm that we all understand that. So if I have 8 parallel timelines, that means that all 8 of them have a highest timeline that matches up perfectly to the situation that they're in. While you're living in this location with this husband, but over here you're living in this location and you're single and happy. Well, then your highest timelines have to look different, but the frequency of what you desire is the same. It's just the situation and the details are different, right? So,
Hello.
yeah,
Did you get caught in the storm driving?
I'll just hit mute. Okay. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. If you have questions about the highest timelines, ask me now. Highest timelines are real. They exist as a potential. For each parallel timeline has this highest timeline potential above it that you can aspire to through frequency matching to the desired outcome of how you want to feel. However, here's a little twist on highest timelines. You can have someone in a parallel timeline. Let's use the number 8 again. Let's say I have 8 parallel timelines. If one of those 8 timelines is really happy, It's not exactly my situation. Again, maybe this one's not married, maybe this one still lives in Canada, but it's a really happy timeline. Well, it's not my specific highest timeline, but that happy timeline can assist me in rising because I'm still connected to it. So still by going and visiting it, still by going and kind of basking in the energy of, wow, you've really got figured out self-love or whatever it is that that version of me really nailed. Okay, you figured out the abundance, or you figured out business, or you figured out the self-love or presence, whatever it is that you're doing so well at, maybe I'm not doing so well at. So I can feed off of that by visiting that timeline, tuning into that timeline, talking to that version of myself. And alternately, if I'm doing really amazing at, say, physical health, fitness, and that happy version of me is lacking in that one area, then they can receive, a higher energy around the fitness and the physical health. So we're always borrowing energy from each other. And again, that's where our oversoul really automatically helps a lot of that out. But you can purposefully and intentionally call in, okay, in which timeline am I the wealthiest? In which timeline am I feeling the most joy? In which timeline am I feeling this or that? And then connect to that through astral travel, which you guys all know how to do here. Okay, good. Okay, another question from Keegan. Does your highest timeline exist in what we would perceive as the future, or do most of them exist in our current time? Highest timelines exist in the present moment. They exist as a potential of right now. It's in the moment that you're in. It's like, okay, the happiest that I could possibly be, that version of myself exists in this now moment with me. And how I align to that is I start acting like them. What would my highest self do in this situation? Because I'm feeling really triggered. How would they react? What would my highest self eat in this opportunity to choose between these meals? What would my highest self do? I have 30 minutes of downtime in my day. Would they choose to go for a walk, or would they choose to meditate, and you just do your best to make the choices that you believe that happiest version of yourself would be. And through channeling, right? Through clean and ethical channeling, you can literally ask, okay, highest self, potential, this version of me that exists, like, help me. Because if everything exists that's possible in this universe, which we're kind of learning, then that version of you, the consciousness of them already exists, even if the physical timeline's not there. So I talk to my highest human self. I specify highest human self. And I talk to her all the time, and I ask her all the time for help with human things like health, relationships, work, whatever it is. And it's been great, actually, specifying in that way. Okay. So now we're getting to Keegan's earlier questions. Your question was about like World War III and like Earth timelines. So does Earth have parallel timelines? Because we've been talking personal this whole time. Yes, we know that there are collective timelines. And what a collective timeline means is that the collective of humanity means like the majority of humanity is is in a different frequency on this timeline than they are here. So like if we're in a collective frequency right now of humanity being very much disempowered, like, okay, for whatever reason, through like mainstream media or whatever it was, we kind of went into a disempowered timeline. That's now my collective reality. Of course, we know that we can have a higher potential timeline than that. We don't have to only live in the collective timeline. In fact, don't do that. Have your own timeline, like higher timeline that you live from. That's how you experience heaven on earth. But there's always going to be the collective choice. And so what is the collective like average? Are they in fear? Are they in neutrality? Are they in this? Are they in that? And that really does determine a lot of the timeline. But the collective isn't the only thing that determines a collective Earth timeline. The different versions of Earth's timelines would be based on, yes, collective choices like 3D, 4D, 5D, that kind of stuff, the collective frequency, but it would also be based on those who are in charge making choices. In our human society, we have like a lot of people that are making decisions for entire countries. Think about that, right? So we have a president in the US, we have prime minister in Canada. So we have huge things like that. And then we also have people that we don't know about that run like the mainstream media, that run the military, that run all these things. And a lot of the time it's like one or two people at the most making decisions for an entire world, entire continent, an entire country, like big, big choices. And so those humans have free will. And their timelines, when you're in a place of power like that, you're going to have a heck of a lot of timelines because every time you make a choice, it affects so many people. And as we've learned, if your choice is affecting the reality of more than just you, it creates a parallel timeline. Imagine being at the head of the military for the US or something like that. Every time you make a choice, new timeline, new timeline, new, because it's affecting so many people. So there is absolutely timelines where we went to war, didn't go to war, and all of that, which was what Keegan was asking about World War III. Yes, there are timelines where there's different scenarios of World War III going terribly, middle of the road, going really well, depending on your perspective and who you are. Okay, I personally would love to know what the German one is like, just out of curiosity. Well, there's infinite timelines though. Like for the World War II, I guess. For World War II, it would be like, okay, well, Hitler's still alive. How old would he be? But maybe there's a timeline where he's still alive. Maybe there's a timeline where he killed himself. Maybe there's a timeline where he was killed. Maybe there's a timeline where he repented and went to jail. Like, I'm really sorry, just take me, and surrendered. Like, there's definitely all of those timelines, right? So how do you know what the truth is? Well, it's all true. And that's why like fortune telling isn't real. Like, because when someone says they can read your fortune, it's like, what timeline are they reading? You don't know, right? Because you've got, like I said, every time you make a choice, it shifts, it shifts, it shifts. So the best way for you to just deal with this is just worry about the timeline that you're on or the one you want to be on and just focus on that, because there's no way to know everything that happened. Like you would be here for 10 years trying to channel, okay, well then if Germany didn't win this or that, what did that timeline look like, what happened, and then if this happened, you literally, it would just be so much, so much. That's what the Akashic records are for. They hold all of that, a massive amounts of information. Okay, and then the other question that Keegan was asking was about what happens if one parallel self dies. Like, what if I get in a car accident in some other, oh, I just got a download, sorry. So soul contracts will take care of a lot of this. Your exit points are written into your soul contracts and it affects all of your parallel selves. We all generally have 3 exit points. Every time you have a near-death experience, that's an exit point that you either chose to leave if you did die. A near-death experience would mean an exit point was available, but you chose to stay. Generally 3. Some people say the last 2 are close together, but that doesn't have to be true because that could freak people out if you've had 2. Germany winning in this timeline is a popular conspiracy theory. Well, there's definitely a timeline where that happened. Sorry, I was just reading the chat again. So the dying thing. Okay. So the soul contracts would keep it pretty steady because your soul contracts are giving you 3 choices. However, the parallel versions of yourself could choose one. I've had a near-death experience. Okay, I had one in like when I was 28. When I was 28 years old, I had a near-death experience. There's parallel versions of me that chose to leave, but I didn't. I'm still here. And I don't think I've had 2 or 3 yet, which are my other 2 exit points. But the parallel versions of me that decided to leave and die, what happens to them, right? So that piece of soul energy or soul consciousness that did die would either join a similar timeline, kind of like when we were talking about timelines merging, or it would be held in the oversoul until all of the timelines are played out and the soul can be whole again and return back to the in-between. Because the one soul, the Jenny soul, is a book, right? The book itself would be Jenny's life. That's my soul contracts. That's my book. But all those timelines are all the different chapters. Well, I'm not going to go back to the in-between and cross over basically into the light until all of those timelines play out. So that means that my soul consciousness that died on my first exit point, which I didn't choose, either joined me and said, okay, I chose to, but now let me join you. And it's not that it would be a different consciousness than mine. It's not like having 2 voices in your head. It would just be like more life force coming into your body, right? Like more of that pure soul consciousness. Okay, I just get more of that. but it immediately amalgamates to this version of me, my memories and all of that. But if there's not a timeline that makes sense for it to merge with, then it gets held by the oversoul, right? So it would go back up the lovely little second diagram. It would go back up the lovely little family tree to be held by either this mini oversoul or this one. And then when all the pieces are done, comes back together, and then we go back all the way up, which is either going back to God's source or whatever you believe heaven is. I always believe that we go to this in-between place to have our life review and write new soul contracts, right? Okay, so did I cover everything? Parallel versions of ourselves can die at different times, but that piece of your soul consciousness doesn't just disappear. It has to go somewhere. Energy doesn't really die. So it either comes to you or a different parallel timeline that's more similar, or it's held by the oversoul until all the timelines play out, which would be at the end of the third exit point, and then we all come back together again. Okay, amazing. Any questions? That was a lot, wasn't it? Who has a question for me? You can feel free to either unmute yourself or type it out, and we can channel some answers for you guys if you have anything beyond what we've covered today. How do you guys feel about that? Anything surprising in that? Anything where you're like, wow, that's like surprising? You know what was surprising to me? I think that it's surprising that our oversoul is like that little chess player that can like move energies around. Ooh, you need this and you need that, and let's just do. Okay, Veronica's asking, is the oversoul always in the ascended master realm? No, definitely not. There are oversouls, it depends on who you are. But there are oversouls, this is very simplified. There are oversouls at many levels. Like this is a little oversoul, which contains your soul family. And then this would be like a larger oversoul. And then there might be a bigger one, but not quite sourced yet. For simplicity, I've just done 2 layers, but think about it as like many layers of oversouls, and they get bigger and bigger. And what I mean by bigger, as they get closer to God's source, they get bigger because they are like holding more of that God consciousness. And then the smaller they get, it means that they're sending parts of themselves down to have like these realities, these timeline experiences. So they get smaller and smaller as you go down. So you have more than one oversoul, basically, is what that means. You have more than one. You can connect with the one that's closest to you, is probably the easiest. So for me, the one that's closest to me, I feel like, is Metatron, which is in the Ascended Master realm or angelic realms. And other people might feel like they have an oversoul that's like in the seraphim realm. I've actually heard someone that I did a reading for where that was true. They had like a seraphim energetic oversoul. And someone else that I saw, their oversoul was like a genie floating in outer space, just like this blue genie that was not really experiencing lifetimes, but was more like asleep and dreaming up all these lifetimes that the smaller timelines were having. It was a lot. So I know it's like, it's really hard for our human brains to comprehend a lot of this. Okay. Aurora is asking, what does collapsing a timeline mean? So I would say that that would mean your timeline would end if you die, or your timeline would end if it merges into another one. So and Aurora, that's a great point, because you hear that lingo a lot in the spiritual community. We're collapsing timelines. We're calling back versions of ourselves. I don't believe that that's true, because you're not just going to be like, okay, Jenny, that's having this incredible life experience in British Columbia. Sorry about your luck, collapsing you. Like, what do you mean? Like, she doesn't get to finish her life? That makes no sense. Every version of you is the real version of you. There's no version of you that's more real. It's not like, oh, I'm the real one and these are clones. They're all you. So you wouldn't do that to yourself. You wouldn't be like, oh, you're in the middle of a life, too bad. Oh, you're too bad. I'm collapsing timelines. Like, that's not a thing. You can merge back if you like. And again, I said that's so rare. But if somebody takes like a what's the word? Oh my God, detour. If somebody takes a detour and then like comes back and then they end up in the exact same life position, living the same place with the same partner, everything would have to be exactly the same. That would be so rare, but it could merge, right? Otherwise, you literally would have to die for that timeline to end. So collapsing timelines is BS, new age speak. That's just not real. It's just not real. You can't do that. It would be like, and you know what? Timelines are so protected by the Timeline Council. So when people are also saying we're collapsing the 3D timelines, like as if we're just going to go, nope, you don't exist because you're no good. We're all about 5D. Well, what do you think happened to all those souls, all those consciousnesses, all those stories that were playing out? You don't get to decide. Oh, that's over. So when people say that, that's that like really eye rolling spiritual jargon where it's like, okay. Like when people just try to overly complicate things, we're collapsing. I have somebody that had to stop following because it was just constant stuff like that. We're collapsing timelines from the phantom matrix as we spiral backwards into the blah, 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 blah. It's like, you don't even know what you're talking about. True teaching is supposed to be like simplified, or you don't get it either. And that's really what I believe. So, okay, moving on. So collapsing timelines, that's not even a thing. Keegan is asking, are parallel timelines planned before we incarnate? No, they couldn't be. Just your soul contract is planned. Everything else is free will choices. Free will choices that I just lost your question. There we go. Free will choices, and they have to be choices that are large enough that affect another person's reality. So you leaving a relationship, you leaving a job, it affects someone else's reality too. Then it creates a timeline. You couldn't possibly know what they'll be before you're born and start making choices. The only thing that's in your soul contracts is the first one, the singular timeline. Iris says, I need to let this information sink in. Totally. You're good, Keegan. Don't worry about asking too many questions. And Veronica's saying, I shared an experience I had in the group chat the other day where I was randomly playing cards, and when my boyfriend discarded a card, I was suddenly, oh yes, I remember this. You said you were pulled physically. You had like this crazy experience of being in New York for a split second and then back. That is a timeline visit. That is it. That is what it felt like when I had that crazy dream too. It was like, how did I get here? I don't know how I arrived. I don't know what I'm doing here. And I also don't know how I know where I am or what's going on, but I do, because there's the version of me that's running this timeline's in the front, and I'm just kind of in the back as the observer, and I'm kind of like, whoa, and it doesn't last long, and then you're pulled back, right? There's a reason for that though. You have to think about, what did that New York version of yourself either need from you, or what did you need from them? How was your oversoul creating harmony with that visit? That's the question to ask. It's like, how did that bring balance to us both? Who was helping who? Something happened in that moment. A shift was created. So what was it? And that's something that you could, ask your oversoul. Okay, when this weird thing happened, that you could get a specific answer about for sure. But that's like exactly what I'm talking about. These moments that there's no explanation for, but it's so cool too. Good. Awesome. Any other questions from anyone? These are such good questions. Thank you all for all of these. Do we feel a little more clarity? You know what? It's like I feel more clarity, yet I also feel more questions than ever, because the deeper you go into stuff, the more you realize it's not as simple as we want to make it as like the human. Well, we just want to be like, well, yeah, parallel timelines exist and I can collapse the bad ones, or I can hop over to the good ones or whatever. And that's just like, it just doesn't quite work like that. You know what though? Let's talk about timeline hopping. I forgot to ask about that and I don't know the answers. Let me just check in with Metatron and ask, what is timeline hopping? Because we've talked about how a higher timeline would be a potential where the soul consciousness could exist to give us like guidance, and we could talk to our higher selves for sure. But to make that timeline a physical reality, we have to rise up into it by frequency matching. So what is timeline hopping? What does a parallel shift look like? Okay. He's saying the word like manifestation. It still has to do with manifestation. Like timeline hopping has to do with like speeding up a manifestation where you don't have to build a timeline. You don't have to fully create a timeline. You can like hop to one. Okay, so what does that mean? He's saying you're thinking of timeline hopping as horizontal and it's still a vertical. Okay, so horizontal, almost picture them with dividers in between them. You can't go live there. You can visit, but you can't go live there because these ones horizontally have a version of you taking it up already. You can't have two Jennies on one timeline. So horizontally kind of is off limits for to stay permanently, although like we talked about, lots of visiting and borrowing energy. If you want to do something permanently, it's vertical. It's a vertical move, right? You can vertically move up where you're doing better in some certain area. And so in order to vertically move up or down, if you're descending, unfortunately, maybe not by choice, but it's happening, that's a shift in your frequency up or down. And so it feels like timeline hopping is vertical. It's up or down. It's not horizontal, and that's what I'm being shown. And so that's really kind of similar to the way that we talked about, well, how do I get to my highest timeline? Well, we frequency match. The inside of your body has to vibrate at the same frequency of the reality you want to live on, or it won't be made manifest. It won't become physical. You'll always be physically walking on the timeline that matches your inner frequency. What are you vibing at? Are you vibing at like pretty loving but still kind of impatient and oh, very specific though? That's exactly the reality you're going to walk in. And if you want to shift that, if you want to timeline hop, if you want to do that, the fastest way is to adjust the inner self, adjust the inner frequency through hypnotherapy, meditation, inner frequency work, getting rid of the heavy stuff, the dense stuff, get it out of you and bring in the frequency of how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel about my relationship? How do I want to feel about money? How do I want to feel about work? Okay, I can choose to feel that now, even though the physical reality doesn't match yet. But if I choose to feel it now, I will, like an elevator, bring myself to the timeline that is physical, that does match that feeling. So it's like an elevator. Timeline hopping is the same principles as the highest timeline, but we don't go this way horizontally because it's already taken, right? Okay. And then Aurora's asking, I have a dream that I dive in different timeline doing things, but I don't understand it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that could be, if it's happening at night, what we said earlier was that the most common things that happen at night is you visiting timelines. So you're probably visiting timelines for sure. Iris is saying visiting a parallel timeline in a dream is the most fun. Okay, cool. I'm glad it can be positive, not always. I wake up in the morning and ask myself, where was I now? It feels so good in my body and high vibe that all I want to do is go back to sleep. Well, that means that you're receiving from that timeline. You're you're the receiver of that, right? That's giving you something beautiful. And there will be times when maybe you're visiting a timeline to give your light and give your good. It might not feel so good, but you're helping, right? And those dreams definitely happen too. And they're not dreams, they're really visitations. So manifestation was taught really basic when we first started to understand this. The book The Secret, I think this was 2007 maybe. And we started being like, oh wait, I'm the creator of my own reality, and all I have to do is think good thoughts and speak good affirmations and create vision boards. And that was the beginning of understanding something a lot deeper. And what we're understanding here is that manifestation, which is really creation, has everything to do with timelines. Everything. It's like if you want to change your reality, you need to get to a different timeline. If you want to get to a different timeline, you need to get in the elevator, and you need to choose the floor. And the way that you get in the elevator and choose the floor is the inner frequency work. And the best way to do that, it's we make it complicated. It's so simple. It's like really just sitting down like once, like not even daily. You don't even do it every day. Just sitting down and deciding how you want to feel and then practicing feeling like that. Well, I really want to feel confident in my work, in my career. I want to feel so confident. Okay, practice, what does that feel like in my body? I'm going to act as if I'm going to be that confident person. And then now that I've made that decision, I just have to hold the energy. I have to hold it and be really consistent and not let myself dip back down. And every time the old pattern tries to pop in, like, oh, but what will people think? You go, nope, nope, unshakable confidence. Oh, no, 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 no. I'm not doing that. I'm up here. I'm up here. And you just keep like stubbornly staying where you want to stay frequency wise. And if you do that long enough, time, it's like you walk into a timeline, a new one. And the only shift would be the thing that you worked on. Everything else in that timeline would feel the same, but that one important thing shifted. And when you nail that, then you can work on the next thing. Okay, good. Now that that's good, I'm going to hold that new frequency, but now I want to work on my health. Okay, what would it feel like, to be so fit and feel so confident in my body? Okay. Oh, I'm feeling that feeling in my body. And because I'm holding that frequency in my body, it's going to create alignment to that reality. And this alignment that I'm feeling is now going to compel me into aligned action. Because now that I'm really holding that feeling of like, oh, I'm so fit, I'm so healthy. Yeah, babe, feels so good. I'm going to feel inspired to be like, I want to cook something healthy. I feel like going for a walk. I feel like da 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 da. You're going to move differently because you're holding that reality in your body. And if you hold it there, hold the energy long enough and consistently, that timeline arrives and you walk into it. And now that one area of your life shifts. And you just keep one thing at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself. I think do one thing at a time. But if you do the timeline work, it's the advanced manifestation, which is really just being the sovereign creator of your reality, right? Okay. Keegan is saying, I have read many accounts on the internet of people who claim to be from a parallel timeline, meaning that they switch places with the other version of themselves in this timeline, have no way back with their original timeline, but I don't know if there's any truth to this. I just recently watched a show like that on Apple TV with this astronaut. I wish I could remember what it's called. It was the coolest show ever, where she accidentally got pulled out of her timeline and was stuck there and didn't know how to get back either. And if that happens, like it happened to me with that icky experience with the abduction, it's like, it's again, this is a frequency thing. So if you let yourself spiral into the fear of it and spiral into the, this isn't right, this isn't it, I would think that the way back would be the elevator. I would, if I was like suddenly finding myself once again trapped in the wrong timeline, which is terrifying, by the way, I would elevator myself back. I would be like, nope, this is who I am. This is what my reality looks like. And I would just like hold that frequency so strongly, no matter how long it took, I would not give up on getting back. And I think that that would be the only way back, to be honest with you, unless you had been abducted like I had, and then they just grab you and drop you back in the proper timeline, which is like the worst thing ever. And if you haven't watched that or watched that video, there's a few on my YouTube channel where I talk about my abduction. That was the worst one I've ever had, and that was like how it ended. It was just awful. Getting dropped in the wrong timeline and then realizing that, and then suddenly ending up back in my actual timeline and in my bed. Most of them are really heartbreaking to listen to if they're true. I can't imagine being in that situation. I think it happens because it happened to me, but I don't think it can be a permanent thing. Eventually, they would be pulled back magnetically to their proper timeline because it goes against the rules of like what's allowed, like time travel. If you're going to time travel, you're not allowed to change things and adjust things. You have to be like an observer only. And if you're in the wrong timeline, where is that person, that version of you that was in that timeline? Are they now in your timeline and you just switched? And if that's the case, that makes sense because you can only have one of you in one at a time. How do you switch back? Right. So I think, again, you would really have to do, I think it does happen. And I think that maybe people are working on getting back to their timelines. But I think that I really believe in divine orchestration. And if that happened, I still think that there would be a reason. I think you'd eventually switch back automatically, and you might not know how long it would take, and that might be hard. What if it was a whole year? That could be really hard. But I think that our oversouls understand more than we do, and they're doing something with that, and then they boom back, right? Yes, please do. You feel free to share that in the group. Okay. Awesome, you guys. I think we're at the end. I think that that's, unless there's any more that doesn't seem, Oracle of Avalon. I had a dream about the time gnomes, teaching me how to bend space and time. It felt so real, and I feel like my higher self learned how to do it. That is so cool. Bending space and time, when people say like collapsing space and time between this and the reality that you want, they're talking about the frequency work or the timeline work. They're talking about hopping timelines. If you want to collapse time and space and not have to put 5 years into creating a beautiful business, and you just want to arrive into that, you can do that. You can absolutely quantum leap. A quantum leap is leaping from one timeline to a higher timeline. Remember though, it's got to be vertical, right? Vertical, or it's going against the grain. You can timeline hop, you can quantum leap, you can do that, but the only way to do it is from within. It's like the frequency elevator inside of your body, and some people are just really good at it and really fast at it, and it could happen overnight. And I think the more that you practice, the more solid it gets for people. But that's probably what they were teaching you, right? Teaching you how to bend space and time. That sounds amazing. On Earth, we have to do it from this frequency match. It's called frequency matching, and it happens within. In a gnome land, they might have a whole other thing that they do. This is an Earth thing. Like, we know humans and Earth, and this is, but time gnomes, maybe they create portals, maybe they create wormholes. Who knows how they do it? That might be very different. But if you're a human, this is the only way to do it, and it's the fastest way to do it. Okay. But our reality has a set of rules that doesn't apply to other realities, because like there are universes that are fully parallel universes and everything is upside down, like gravity is different, everything's different. Well, that's a whole different ball game. So again, all we can really do is focus on where we are and what we have to work with, and if we want to make our lives better, just really focusing on that. Manifesting happens with your heart and gratitude. Gratitude is the ultimate cheat. And that is a frequency thing, right? Gratitude is one of the highest frequencies. If you hold that in your body, you're in an elevator. Keegan, I'm here. I hear time travel doesn't work in the way we think. Okay, it does, meaning we travel to a timeline that looks like our past, but in reality, it's just a parallel timeline. Yeah, very cool. So time travel is a whole other ball game. And that is what got Atlantis into so much trouble, because they started creating this technology with the help of the Greys. They were creating this technology that was going to send them ahead in time or back in time, or to parallel timelines, exactly like you said, Keegan. And the thing is that that's not allowed, because like I said, there's a council that actually protects timelines, because you're going to ruin someone's experience. Like if there's a Keegan on timeline A and you're on timeline B, you can't go take over timeline A, because that Keegan, then what do? You've just burst open their reality, and they've lost all that time of Earth lessons and Earth experiences and all of that. Because you have to remember, we're all playing characters, right? And so if you ruin the story for someone, they're going to come out of the character and lose all that time and effort. So you're not allowed to time travel, because if yourself sees yourself, it's a game changer. You're never going to believe anything ever again, right? So you're not supposed to do that on Earth. And so that is a very protected thing. And also, there can be people with nefarious agendas that want to go into timelines, and maybe they want to take the resources, they want to do this, they want to do that. And you're only allowed your own timeline to mess up. You can F it up all you want, unfortunately, because that's free will, but you can't go and mess up other worlds and have that be okay with the councils. That's like a absolutely no-go. That's like one of the universal laws, non-interference outside of your own timeline. So anyway, long story short, that's why Atlantis was like the one that we know, the timeline that we know, was shut down for all of that. They're like, nope, you guys are getting selfish, you guys are getting crazy, there's gonna be none of this. Keegan again is asking, there are these ghost islands that appear in the Atlantic out of nowhere. I truly believe that there are people from Atlantis trying to escape by going to other timelines such as our own. Interesting. That's very cool. So when timelines cross, maybe there's a bleed through. And I did a video about this on YouTube called Stargates, and I talked about how realities, right where the line is between human and fae, there's a blend. It's never hard and fast. There's going to be a blend where you feel like, ooh, what's happening? And especially if you're in a frequency where you can perceive of the frequency of the fae, which would be higher than human, then as you're walking into that, you would experience that bleed over that I forget the word that I used in that video, but like there is a space where both exist, and then it slowly turns into just the Fey realm. And so that in between could be what you're talking about, ghost islands in between. There's an in between space where these realities have overlapped, and in the overlap, both sides can see it, but none can cross. Do you know what I mean? So cool. Aurora, I heard Himalaya Mountain was a place where timelines cross. Cool. That's really cool. That's how people used to travel to Avalon. They would call a mist to connect the worlds. Yeah. So like the mists of Avalon to travel through. Now, somebody that wasn't of the frequency of Avalon would go through the mists and perceive nothing, but somebody that was of the right frequency would be able to travel through and perceive of it all, I believe. And again, this is all actually in that even about Avalon and the mists. I believe all this is in the video Stargates. If you guys haven't watched it yet, it was super cool. And Hitler was trying to get there to jump timelines. Oh, I saw recently somebody channeling about how Hitler had communication going with aliens and communication going with like off-world technology from aliens, and he was trying to get his hands on that. So obviously that would be like another Atlantis situation where it would be like fully shut down. You're not allowed to do that. So that makes sense for sure. Is CERN messing with the planetary timeline? Yes, I have talked about that before. So the CERN experiments are like, I won't explain exactly how they work. They're pretty convoluted, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to open up like portals to other worlds. They're trying to see what dark matter really is, and it can definitely affect the collective timeline, right? So it might not necessarily affect, so your timeline has two parts, you personally, and then when you go out into the world. And so if it affected the collective timeline when you go out into the world, those like the Mandela effects would be there. You'd be like, oh God, we shifted again. But if you're strong and rooted into your own higher frequency timeline, it won't pull you down. And that's what we're supposed to be doing, the timeline work that we're supposed to be doing personally. But yeah, CERN messing, that would be like when I talked about, can Earth have parallel timelines? Yeah, the collective timelines can totally change depending on the dominant frequency. And if they change that with CERN, that's very much Atlantis energy. And they're going to get really close to getting shut down by literal like galactic forces if they keep going. Plus I said that the Earth can have parallel timelines that happen from the people that are in charge making free will choices, like presidents, people that run CERN, people that run the military. All of those people have a lot of power over the mass collective of humanity. And so absolutely we can see, I would say Mandela effects would be one of the main signs that CERN has done something. You would start to be like, wait a minute, no, I remember it like this, and now all of a sudden it's this. What happened? Well, CERN did something, and we shifted up or down on our vertical timelines for sure. I just lost my question. Keegan saying there's an island called High Brazil off the coast of Ireland that keeps appearing and reappearing. Very cool. And Brian agreeing that he thinks the Nazis had great alien technology, and Keegan saying he's experiencing a lot of Mandela effects lately. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so if you're experiencing a lot of Mandela effects, that could mean you personally have shifted timelines. You've either gone up or down, and then you need to know like, is my frequency higher or lower than it normally is? Like, am I elevatoring myself up or down? Or is this a collective thing where like, is it just you that's shifted timelines, or is everyone noticing it? So if more than one person is like, no, you're right, that's a weird Mandela effect, then that's like a collective shift. If you're the only one going, no, seriously, I remember it being like this, it's just you that shifted. So that could be a little lonely. So you can shift, or the collective can all shift together. And when the CERN and stuff like that, it would be like a full collective shift. If someone's doing a lot of personal work, just they could shift up or down, right? Makes sense. Yeah, CERN is like concerning, but also I trust in like the divine orchestration of it's all, everything is just like a large chessboard, and the oversoul has got it. They know what they're doing. They're helping things to be in balance and in harmony, and I really do trust in that. So that helps me stay out of fear frequency too. Because no matter what the collective does, I've proven to myself, through experience that I can choose differently. Because as you guys know, like my whole country was like, no, no more freedom for you. And I was like, no, thank you, I'll leave. Like you can just choose differently. You can always choose something else. You have free will choices. And even when you think you can't, usually there's some way that you can make some kind of get aligned and then take action. Get aligned and then take action. So what I did was I aligned to a version of myself that had freedom, was happy, could go to the movies, could do whatever I wanted to do. And then from that place of alignment, took the inspired action. What needs to happen? What do I need to do? Help me in doing that. Keegan saying, I feel like switch between 3D and 5D every day. That's so normal. Everybody's bouncing all around, mostly the 3D lately for the most part, unfortunately. Yeah, that's normal. It's normal to feel up and down. A lot of the times we get triggered into lower experiences. A lot of the times we, through ascension symptoms, can come down through the flares. But remember, when that integration period is over, you should pop back up again. And if you're not, then there's something more permanent going on in your frequency that you need to attend to, such as healing, have a good cry, do some energy work, go for a walk, do a meditation, channel your guides, or shift something permanent, shift your job, move, do something. I've had the feeling before, like, oh, I forgot, this is a perfect time to say this. This is a very weird but very real experience. I had this crazy feeling like I had left my long-term relationship. This was in 2021. I left my long-term relationship. I moved a few hours away, still in Canada though. And I basically like felt like I was restarting like my life in a lot of the ways. And I was like, okay, so this is my new life. And at first, when I got into that new timeline, everything felt really good and I felt really excited to be there. But then things started shifting and I started talking to Brian and things started like pulling me in that direction. And then we had one visit. And when I came back to my apartment, I remember saying like, this feels wrong now. Like I feel out of place. Like I feel like I'm in the wrong timeline. Like I can't exist like this. Like everything just feels so weird and so off. I feel like I'm playing a role. Like I feel more like I'm playing a character and what should I feel and what should I want to do instead of naturally being natural and just here. Like I felt like my real self was needed to be there and like this was just so fake or something. And meanwhile, I had been fairly happy with it up until that. And then you go visit another potential timeline and you come back and you're like, oh no, okay, now that I visited that one, that's where I'm supposed to be. This feels so wrong. And so then again, get into alignment and take action. And that's when I moved to the US. But yeah, if you ever feel like you're in the wrong timeline, it feels awful. It feels like you're just don't fit. You're like, it almost feels physical, like your body like feels like it's not your own. It just feels like I'm visiting an old version of myself. I've outgrown this. This is so weird. And then that's really important for you to take action, not from a place of fear, though, from that place of alignment. Keegan saying, I feel like I need to do a lot of the inner work without handing my power over to my guides, which is very difficult for me to do. Yeah, that's such a great point. You are the power in your own self, in your own life. You can't give that power away. Like nobody can also do it for you, right? Like your guides can't come in and shift your thinking patterns to something more positive. They can't do that work for you. They can, wash over you with white light and try and do all these things, but you have to change the patterns, right? Iris, is the oversoul just light energy or is it both light and dark? Everything is both light and dark in the universe. Even God's source is light and dark. It's God's source is the perfect harmony of shadow to light, where everything feels balanced and good and holds itself like that. And if you think about it, like God is, if God was like a big ball of so masculine God is like the ball of light, like a giant grand central sun, and then feminine goddess is like the black womb of creation that everything comes out of, the black void of potential, and together they make life. Then you need both. It's like the womb and the light together. And so shadow is just like a womb, it's just like potential. So the oversoul is both, definitely. We are both. And when we're in harmony, in pure integration, and neither of them is out of control or trying to bypass anything, then it's harmony, and that's the point. So your ascension isn't about getting rid of your shadows, and it's not about getting rid of your darkness. It's about loving and accepting yourself exactly as you are. The answer is always love. Aurora, how many souls does one oversoul oversee? I think that really depends on the level. So if it's an oversoul that's just holding your own personal soul tribe, maybe 100. But if it's an oversoul like an ascended master or an angel, definitely like thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. But there's different levels of oversouls all along the way too. And so we have to understand, like, there can be the mini oversoul, the medium, the large, the mini God, which is really big, all the way back to God source, which technically is also an oversoul. God source is the ultimate oversoul to all souls. So billions, I guess, billions of souls that exist. Awesome, you guys. These questions are so good. This is such an interesting, complex topic. And I just want to say, take what resonates and feel free to leave what doesn't, right? Take what resonates. It's all about the perspective that is supporting you. That's the most important thing. So good. Okay, I think that's it. So I'll leave it there. I want to thank you guys for joining me. I want to remind you that we are doing a Claim Your Timeline event, which we don't want to miss. And that is on Claim Your Timeline is in 2 weeks, exactly on the Wednesday. It's going to be May 29th. So very excited about that. You're welcome. And Keegan, just one last question about New Earth. What year or what timeline do you think that existed in? I'm not sure. That event was like a long time ago for me now. So I really can't remember. When I channel, it goes in and then out. So I wouldn't be able to speak on it and feel like I could be accurate. But we definitely visited a timeline potential of a beautiful new Earth that had kind of Atlantis-y vibes, not in a bad way, in a highly advanced technological way. And it was really cool. And if you guys haven't done that yet, check it out. It's in the astral section of the resource center, and it's called New Earth, visiting New Earth, maybe something to do with visiting New Earth. It was very cool. And I still feel like that is an absolute likely potential that we're headed into, looking at how AI is progressing. It's like progressing really fast, real fast. So we're probably headed to self-driving cars and self-building buildings where they build themselves, like literally the craziest stuff, but it's going to be really cool too. Awesome, you guys. Okay. Thank you so much. Have an oh, thank you, Norm. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day. I will talk to you all very soon. Don't forget in 2 weeks that we're meeting up again to do some actual timeline work together, where we're going to do the elevator work. We're going to do the frequency matching. We're going to claim the timeline that feels the best to us. And I got, like I said, a lot of really positive reactions and responses and results from the last time that I did it. So I want to do it again with you guys. Okay. And for myself, to be honest. Okay, good. I'll see you all very soon. Have a great night. Bye, everybody.